first thing I'd like to say about my project about corporal punishment in the schools is that it is complete. It is done. It is finished. I'm so excited. I chose corporal punishment because Georgia is one of the 19 states that corporal punishment is still legal to use in your discipline plans if your district decides to. Um, and that would be one of the reasons why I chose it. In my introduction, I have provided you a video that you can watch at your leisure, and that gives you a nice little overview of corporal punishment. As an introduction, I just stated what the definition of corporal punishment is, and it's a physical punishment which inflicts pain as justice for many different types of offenses. There's different kinds of corporal punishment. There's corporal punishment that is domestic, and that is when parents or guardians use the paddle or spanking at home for their discipline. There's judicial corporal punishment, and that is when someone breaks the law and the courts decide that they're going to be physically punished. I don't believe the United States does that anymore. The majority of those happened a long time ago in the medieval times, and as things progressed, people stopped doing that. There are some countries that still do, but I believe they're in the Middle East. So that does not affect the United States. But there's three types of corporal punishment, and the one we're going to focus on is corporal punishment in the school. So that is using physical punishment to inflict pain for justice. All right. I started off with continuing to overview. And like I said a minute ago, there's 19 states that still have corporal punishment legal in their state. If you'll look at both of these maps, you can see that it is just about completely contained to the Bible Belt. So this blue is where you can see the states that are that it's legal. And one of the things that I read with my research was that people that still use corporal punishment today will usually have strong ties to religion because, spare the rod, spoil the child. And that came straight out of the Bible. And so people still like to use that phrase, and they still like to use the rod. So that is one of the reasons that I believe that it is still so prevalent in the Bible Belt states. If you look at this right here, you can see on this map the percentages of schools that use corporal punishment. And you look, my main concern was Georgia. And if you look at Georgia, Georgia is not the highest and it's not the lowest, but it's right there in the middle. But I believe Georgia's fifth as far as the children that are under in the country that are under corporal punishment in their schools. All right, I like this page because I like numbers, and there's a couple of charts that I found, and they're put out by the U.S. Department of Education. And the Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Education is the division that is responsible for keeping the data on discipline in schools. And they compile these charts and put them out. And I believe this is I think it's for 2011 and 2012. The actual reports came out in 2014. But if you will see, these are the 19 states that still have corporal punishment legal, and that's the percentage of schools reporting corporal punishment. Mississippi, 57% of their schools have corporal punishment in their schools, and 59% of their student body of the whole state is under corporal punishment in their schools. Now, if you go down to Georgia, which is where I have continued to focus, 15% of our districts schools agree to use corporal punishment. That's fairly low to me. And only 12% of the student body of the entire state has corporal punishment as an option in their school for corporal punishment. So although we are one of the 19, we are not even close to Mississippi, Arkansas, Alabama. Those three, they They like corporal punishment. All the research shows that there's a disparity between race, gender, and disabilities or not disabilities. If you'll see, basically, if you're a black boy, your percentage is higher for getting for being subjected to corporal punishment. A male black child with a disability 14% and no disability 16%. So if you look, if you the least would be the white female at 2%. So anyway, I kind of like that. But now when you look at this regional map, they have highlighted the districts, and those colors will show that district how many. Let's see, it says use of corporal punishment by school district. It's the percentage of students corporally punished, and that is a word, and it came up misspelled every time, that word right there. But that is how the reports put it out. Punished at a district school. The concentration of districts using corporal punishment are mainly located in rural areas, what we just said, and our community is smack dab in the middle. So here's Georgia, and the rural part of Georgia is where you will see the majority of districts that do use corporal punishment. So I'm seeing some green in there, and that must be my county because we do not use corporal punishment in Sumter County. Now, this chart right here was one that I really liked because people jump up and down about how, children being paddled. But if you look at Georgia, out of our entire state, only 12,792 children in this particular year, I believe it was 2011, 2012, received corporal punishment in that school term. That's less than 1% of all the children in Georgia. So it's not as prevalent as people like to think. And if you come down here to the bottom, this is how many children were in the 19 states were had some form of corporal punishment across all the country, and it's less than 1% of for the children in just those 19. They're not comparing it to the children all over the country. They're comparing it to just the children that make up those 19 states. So I like numbers, and I like facts and figures. It's hard to argue with those. Okay. So it was fun kind of finding most of the corporal punishment images that you could find online were back in the day, maybe when my mama was in school. And so that would have been the 50s and the 60s, maybe. And the questions that I keep asking myself as I'm going through the research and I am looking at, from every angle, one of the things that I ask myself is, if a school decides to use corporal punishment in their discipline plan, will it have a positive or negative effect on your school climate? That's important because you don't want to add anything that's going to take you to the negative side. All right, so you have to consider that when you're thinking about implementing something. All right, would you want to be the administrator with the job to carry out corporal punishment as the solution for other educators' discipline problems, like your classroom teachers bringing you their child for you to paddle? That puts you at risk with liability to solve the classroom's problems. Do you want to be that person? So if my mama always said, before you say you want to do something, you got to be willing to be the end all. And if you're not willing to be the end all, you might not want to have it in your school. Was corporal punishment used in your childhood? And if so, did it have any influence on the person you are today? All of the research talks about the development of children and how it negatively affects them and how it stunts their cognitive development, how it can cause degrees of depression, anxiety from a small level all the way up to serious concern. So, I'd say I think the stats are 90 to 95% of all children go through some form of corporal punishment in their life, whether it's domestic or through the school. So that kind of makes me wonder if that research is correct, because if 95% of the people have had it, then we'd all be in depression right now. Below, you will find some of the common pros and cons given for and against the use of corporal punishment. Which side do you find yourself leaning towards when it comes to discipline in your school? Before I scroll down to the positive and the negative aspects, I will tell you that the research, there's mountains and mountains of research to go through that tell you all the negative aspects of using corporal punishment in schools. There's arguments pretty much for the positive aspects. So if you're just a fact person and that's the only thing you're going to use to make your decisions, the amount of research would overwhelm the positive or the proponent side. Okay, now when you are talking about the people that are for corporal punishment, you'll hear time and time again, it was used on me and I turned out fine. You will hear that it's aligned with my community and my religious beliefs. You will hear that children that have corporal punishment as their discipline usually have easier time setting boundaries, and they immediately know what is right from wrong. And parents and children, when they're given the option of detention or suspension, will 9 times out of 10 they will choose to be suspended. To get the paddling, because they don't want to miss valuable school time. The parent doesn't want to have to leave work to have to come and get the child to pick them up because they were in detention, or they have to stay home with them because they were suspended. So it's an easy fix and it's a quick fix. The child goes back to the classroom, doesn't miss much instruction time, and the parent doesn't miss work. And students sometimes will have after school activities they don't want to miss if they have detention. So parents and students do usually opt for the corporal punishment over suspension and being kept after school. All right. Now, one of the things that about the mountain of evidence, the proponents of corporal punishment, they believe that the way the United States Education Department gathers the evidence skews the results. They say that all that schools turn in for them to, put in their to crunch the numbers and put in their fancy little charts and maps, all that's given to them is whether it was a boy or girl, the sex. They are told the age, they are told the race, and they're told if the child has a disability or not. Doesn't go into what disabilities they have. So the proponents for corporal punishment say that the data does not come with enough information to make completely informed educational decisions. All right, so I will tell you that the naysayers, I could still be typing what all they say. One of the big things is globally, corporal punishment is being, they're wanting to phase it completely out. They don't want anybody in the world to be using corporal punishment. And the United States has not kept up with the other countries. Like Europe, all of Europe is completely banned there. The only places besides the United States that uses corporal punishment, there's some countries in Africa and a few countries in the Middle East. And other than that, we're on our own. And so they're trying to use that, the mob mentality, to force the United States to ban it completely. The United Nations, the UN, they have said that it is child abuse. Every educational professional group comes out against corporal punishment. No, not one professional education group is a supporter of corporal punishment in the schools. So it's kind of, you have to use everything that you know to make your decisions. All right, now I'm going to go to my next page. And keeping my questions in mind about it being in our school, I don't want to play these videos because it'll make this particular video go forever. And I know y'all have got 60 or 70 of these to listen to and watch. But I found some videos on YouTube the one from Oklahoma, because it is legal in Oklahoma. This particular principal that you're seeing right there, she has never spanked any child in her building, and she believes in building relationships, and she does not believe in corporal punishment. But they do talk to other principals that say that it is used as a last resort. They follow the guidelines set by the state. When it is used, they you know, they do it in a fair, and it's not too harsh of a punishment for what the way that they do it. So that is Oklahoma. Even though they're like Georgia. Even though it is legal there are some districts or schools that that do use it, and then there's some that don't. All right, in Tennessee, now that one is a pretty good one to watch. It's pretty recent, and there's a female principal, and she is like, "That's what the parents want. That's what the parents are gonna get." And she says she has no intentions of getting rid of corporal punishment in her school. So this video right here, it's just always fun to watch somebody with a southern accent. But anyway, so this is the effects of corporal punishment, and this would be how in a child's life, and will help you if you watch it. It pretty much says all of the cons right here in this video. And this man right here is a medical doctor. I believe he's an OBGYN, and he says that children who get spanked have a hard time forming relationships, and they have issues in dating. So that one was pretty interesting to me. And then, if you know me, this one came up, and it's Tom and Jerry, and it's pretty cute. Tom obviously is the educator in this video. He's got on the mortarboard, and he is trying to train this kitten how to catch the mouse. And obviously he did good. The kitten caught the mouse. But when it's time to turn the mouse over, the kitten won't do it, and the kitten lets the mouse go. So he pretty much sits down and puts the kitten over his knee and wears the kitten out. But if you've ever watched Tom and Jerry, he doesn't win in the end. So it's a cute little 3-minute little video. Sometimes at 2 a.m. when you're working, you need something like that. But anyway, so everybody, my thought is everybody has opinions. Everybody comes to the table with different experiences, and you have to take all of those things. But you also have to have tolerance and respect for the other people's beliefs. But if your district doesn't believe in it, you do not have the right to use it. Okay, so my case that will help me answer some of those questions that I brought up a couple of slides ago is, of course, the landmark case of Ingram versus Wright. This case was, decided in 1977, and it pretty much set the stage for corporal punishment to be allowed in all 50 states if that's what the state chooses. And I have mixed emotions about this case. The boys that were paddled to the point where they needed medical treatment, and they get all the way to the Supreme Court because one court rules in favor, one court strikes it down, so they end up at the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court basically says that their due process can't be violated because due process is for criminals, and they're not going to compare children to criminals. So that set the courts up. So it's courts, even when a child might have been severely punished, that set the courts up for them to just completely dismiss cases because they could always use that precedent that was set there. And I really didn't like that because, that was pretty harsh to me. And when you read about the specifics of these children, that's not corporal punishment to me. The way these children were disciplined, that doesn't need to be discussed as corporal punishment. That's a crime. And the teacher or the administrator that's doing that, I think they knew it when they were doing it. You can't do that to anybody. So anyway, I was not pleased with the way the courts left that. It was a 5-4 decision, blah, 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 blah. We all know that we've studied that and studied that and studied that. And, but it did set the precedent the U.S. Supreme Court has not seen another case, if they've not agreed to hear another case about corporal punishment since this case. So this case has pretty much set the standard. And I give you some. This would be something maybe. There's some good, cute little videos out there that would explain this to even children. So if you're a teacher of young children and they're old enough to grasp these concepts, you can start teaching children about their due process and their rights as an American citizen. Um, but anyway, so I give you the backgrounds and the rulings. This was all in my case brief, so I don't really want to go back over all of that, but I've provided it. I found a picture of Ingram and his mother, and usually you can't find the case if there was a young child in it, but I guess this was after he had gotten a little older. And there's the Supreme Court building before graffiti got put all over it. But anyway, that's a whole nother conversation. All right, my second case is Hall versus Tony. Hall versus Tony did not make it to the U.S. Supreme Court. It did go to the district court, then it went to the appellate court, blah, 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 blah. This legal jargon has really mumbled my brain up here lately. But what this court case did, the importance of this court case to me is, the child was severely paddled and was paddled so that she ended up that day when she got home from school, she ended up in the hospital for 10 days. She had even back issues that that might not ever get better. She might be lifelong illnesses or injuries. And I mean, she was severely punished. And she was young. I want to say she was 7 or 8. I can't remember. I'd have to read and find it. But and when they got to court, they wanted to throw the due process out because she wasn't a criminal. Well, one of the judges in the appellate court, let's see, this is the standard that this case set. Whether the force applied caused injury so severe, was so disproportionate to the need presented, and was so inspired by malice or sadism rather than a merely careless or unwise excessive zeal, that it is amounted to a brutal and inhuman abuse of official power, literally shocking the conscience. Well, I'm going to tell you that, to me, the case of Ingram versus Wright did the same thing. But it opened the door for children's rights to be protected and to make sure that educators are held accountable. So when balancing facts, personal experiences, and the law to decide your personal opinion of corporal punishment being used in schools, remember that the cases brought before judges are not typical incidents and happen when corporal punishment is used as a method of discipline on a normal school day. So typical corporal punishment does not compare to what brought these cases all the way to a Supreme Court or to an appellate court. If it was a typical case, it would never get out the door. Oh, I say that. Some people, it might, the way people are so happy these days. But that's the way I feel about it. Now, I did this article right here, Corporal Punishment in Public Schools, an analysis of federal, I forget the exact title, but I wanted to basically cite this entire article because it gave examples of case after case after case where one teacher took a push pin and stuck it into a child purposefully. I mean, one teacher threw a metal lock thing and hit a child, and he admitted he knew what he was doing and he knew it was going to hurt the child, and the child lost his eye. I mean, there were so many cases in this that were examples of corporal punishment gone wrong that I just attached the whole file because A, I want to keep that for posterity, and B, I read that with my mouth hanging wide open because I don't know where an educator I don't know an educator that would do any of the things that were listed in that article. I also know that when you're teaching children, I don't have the best singing voice in the world, but I always while I'm looking for things, I look for things that would be easy for my children. And I found a cute little song that teaches you it's the due process song. And due process is the key and to these cases. And so children need to know their rights and they need to learn them early. But so that would be my um, two cases that helped me when I was forming my opinion or my answer to my questions. Now, this I brought in just a slide for Georgia just because Georgia is there's no federal laws for corporal punishment, but the U.S. Supreme Court case makes it okay to have corporal punishment. But the states have to decide the law that regulates what's going to happen in the school. So I brought in, and I cited it so that I wasn't taking credit for it, but I brought in, this is the exact Georgia law. Now, and this is what Georgia law says we should do if we're going to use corporal punishment in our schools. Now, when you read that, it's just, sometimes it's like reading a foreign language. So this was getting late when I did this. I'm sorry. What they had said was, and then right here is what I thought they had said. So I kind of go through and give you step by step, what you should follow to be able to use corporal punishment in a Georgia classroom if your system decides that it is okay. And because I believe that there's so many things like this that educators are in classrooms right now and don't know all of the laws. And if you don't know the law, you might end up learning it the hard way by sitting in a courtroom. And my theme would be the more you know. Now, and this is an interesting video right here. This is a 5-year-old. The mother had signed consent. This was in 2016 in Georgia. The mother had signed a consent form so that the child could be spanked. And then when they spanked him, somebody videoed it. And of course, it went viral. And then, of course, then she didn't want, her child paddled. So it was kind of a big issue and it went viral. And I also noticed that several of the blog posts and several of the articles that I found were like around 2016. So I think this video just brought the topic back up to the surface because it became a nationwide discussion. So I clicked that in there just for posterity and so that you could, this principal it was like trying to herd cats, trying to hem that little boy up to give him one lick. But so that would be the issues facing Georgia if you choose to use corporal punishment. Now, the 4 questions that I had, and I'm not going to dare read all of this to you, but I put all the 4 questions in here and I answered them after going through this. I'll be honest, I don't think that my opinion changed too much. I believe that if your system decides to use corporal punishment, as long as that it is regulated and that it is done fairly and justly, that I don't think there's a legal problem with it. I don't think that now if you're off abusing children and knocking their eyes out and sending them to the hospital, yes, you probably are going to stunt their development in major ways. But I just don't believe that. I will tell you one of the reasons I don't believe it. I told a little story when I answered the influences that you have lived through that help shape who you are. In this particular, to answer this particular question, when I was in the 4th grade, my classroom that I had, and my teacher's name was Miss Fourth, 4th grade, Miss Fourth. And on the other side of the wall of our classroom was the principal's office, Mr. Payne. Yes, his name was Payne. And so we couldn't hear anybody hollering or screaming or anything, and it didn't happen often. I was 10, it was 1976. But we could hear on a regular basis that, somebody was going in his office and getting a paddling. And our classroom, it was a great deterrent from misbehaving because we knew we never forgot what could happen. And I became pretty close to that 4th grade teacher, and she's probably the reason I am a teacher. And we communicated back and forth and visited one another throughout the rest of her life. She passed away about 10 years ago. And sometimes we would get together once I was a teacher and we would talk about stuff, and we would laugh about the principal paddling on the other side of the wall. And she told me that the school kind of realized that her class always had the lowest amount of discipline referrals. So they kind of started keeping up with it. And then they thought, well, let's put these children that we know, let's stack her room with some of the behavior problems. And so they did. And I mean, her class was still continued to be. So none of, I mean, she probably didn't have to send anybody to the office, but maybe once or twice a year. But the discipline referrals were so much lower in her room, and it was because they had the idea that they knew that it could happen. And I'm still friends with probably 60% of the people that were in my class in the fourth grade because it's a little bitty community. And none of us are depressed or having a lot of anxiety. And the majority of us got a college degree. So, maybe we would have been rocket scientists if we wouldn't have. I don't know. And I was also had domestic corporal punishment in my home. I mean, I was never abused. I mean, I might have thought I was. So I and I also would like to say that my first year teaching in 1988 was the first year my school system did away with corporal punishment and brought in the wonderful use of assertive discipline. And, it took a while for it gradually gained speed, but I've seen respect for teachers, respect for each other, respect for themselves, just decline over since 1988. And, maybe it's because we took prayer out. Maybe it's because there's no paddling. I'm not sure which it is. I've never been in a school that did have corporal punishment. But I've lived through a school that had it. And thank goodness I never once was on the receiving end of that. But it was part of the reason I wasn't, because I knew that it was there and it was real, and I was going to be punished if I did something I wasn't supposed to do. So I did not, those mountain of, or maybe you can say I'm hard-headed, but the mountain of research did not change my mind. And if that's not your view, I sure hope that you have tolerance for mine. I have tolerance for yours. But anyway, that's just kind of how the way that I came to an end there. And I ended it with, I found some cute little jokes that were on, and this is my favorite one right here. COVID-19 homeschooling, and just like that, corporal punishment and prayer were back in school. So I hope you enjoyed my little project. It was very time consuming, but I did learn. If your goal was for me to learn a bunch about this issue, I believe you as a professor were successful, because I learned a bunch. Here's my references right here. I couldn't copy and paste them in because it would mess up with the APA style, so I just PDF'd it and attached it. And that's all, folks. And that's all, folks, for my project for this class this semester and this program. I'm so excited. I'm going to sleep for 8 hours tonight. But anyway, y'all enjoy the rest of your summer. I hope you enjoyed my project. And we'll see you on July the 6th.